This is a show that brings to the forefront newsmakers, entertainers, and those making a difference in our lives and in our world. Each week is a new adventure with topics ranging from the most serious and cutting edge to the most lighthearted and entertaining.
This is Taking Care of Business with Richard Solomon.
Greetings, everyone. Richard Solomon, Taking Care of Business. This week, we have some special jazz music. We're going to be talking to Stan Chovnick, the president of Metropolitan Records, a past guest and a friend of the show. And to help us, we have Paul Solomon as our co-host, because Paul is a musician in his own right. He's a violinist, has been a violinist for decades. And we welcome everybody to the show. Stan, thank you for being gracious enough with your time. And Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so in the background, I am playing Love Vibrations for Planet Earth, which is your new CD.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, if you want to just have a nice little mellow moment, just kind of be able to just drive in a nice clear day, you put this on, it's actually very serene. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's the Love Vibrations is supposed to be both healing and helping the earth and helping the people of the earth, and at the same time be jazz. So,
well, there's a picture of a handsome devil in the inside of the CD that says, "Let the love vibrations reverberate throughout the planet, bringing freedom, goodwill, happiness, healing, joy, love, peace, and unity consciousness to all inhabitants of the earth." So that's pretty heavy.
Well, I wanted to do that because I feel like in this day and age that people need to come together and people need to protect the earth and protect each other and to be connected and to make the world a better place and not to separate each other from other groups, other colors, other races, and just all to be working together to make the earth a better place. And that was the inspiration for Love Vibrations for Planet Earth.
So you have 5 tracks on this album. Is there a unifying concept theme? This is where I need Paul. Is this like a concept album?
It is. I mean, there's one exception to the concept, and that is the second song, which is called Little Princess, and that's for my granddaughter.
For Emma?
For Emma.
Because it says so on the CD. It's not,
yes.
It's not like I really knew that answer.
So otherwise, the songs are all kind of connected. We have a song, Searching for Spirituality, which Linda wrote. And it was
the press grave for all those people out there.
Oh, and it was inspired by a trip that we took to New Mexico, where we went to the Ghost Ranch where Georgia O'Keeffe lived, and she was a very spiritual person, and she was searching for spirituality. That was what her intention was when she went to New Mexico, and that inspired Linda Pressgrave to write that piece. And then we have another piece by Linda called The Journey, and that's also the journey through life and different aspects. What Linda always says is when you're thinking life goes in one direction, all of a sudden it goes in another. So that's connected. And then there's my piece called Universal Freedom, which is connected to what I just said before, that I feel that people should be entitled to be free to follow their desires and wishes, and that people should not be inhibited by the way they think because people around them might think differently. So universal freedom is that everybody should be entitled to the freedom to be and think and do what they want, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. So that's my inspiration for that piece, and it's connected, as far as I see it, to the Love Vibrations for Planet Earth.
Now, your role as a grandfather Has
Yes.
that changed your worldview?
Has it changed my my role in life? You mean?
No, your worldview.
I think as I've gotten older, I've started to look at the world in a different way than I did when I was younger, and I do feel like I want to communicate and bring people together and have the world be a better place where everyone is loving each other and trying to help each other and realizing that we're all here together, and if we don't take care of each other and the earth, then it might not exist in the future. So a message like that has probably come into play more as I've gotten older, yes.
Well, as a musician, though, has your views musically changed?
Yes, it has too. Both Linda and I really have changed the way that we have looked at music. I think I know for myself that I've tried to have the music be important in the sense of bringing across a message, sending a message to other people, not just having a pretty song, but having a message in the music. And that's something that I didn't think about when I was younger. If I really liked the song, then that was great. But I think it's important for me at this point to also have a message in the music.
So you're not just creating a tone poem anymore. You want to do something beyond that.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
So then my question then is, how do you do that? I mean, do you sit at a score? Do you sit at a keyboard? I'm very fascinated by the process because this is very different from what I would be doing.
Well, I think what I do is sometimes I'll just be, I don't know, thinking about something, and then some idea will come to me, and then what I do is having my iPhone with me. I'll just put under the notes some kind of an idea that I come up with. It could be a musical idea. It could be something that came to my mind, a thought that came to my mind, and then I'll put that down, and then I don't know. I just let it develop. I'm not in a hurry to finish a tune. So it's not like I'll sit down like in an afternoon and say, okay, this afternoon I'm going to write this piece, and then tomorrow I'm going to play it. I just kind of let the piece develop in my mind, and that's like in Love Vibrations. One of the things that I did is I have a fascination with gongs. And in the beginning of Love Vibrations, there's actually 6 gongs that the different musicians in the group play from all over the world. One gong is from Nepal. One is from Thailand. I have gongs from China. They're all different kinds of gongs. And
do the gongs play just one tone? Is it just like an A or a C, or is it multi-tone?
It's interesting because each gong is different. In fact, it was funny because once I started buying the gongs and playing them, I started reading about them a little and noticed that they were just like different instruments. There's different kinds of gongs, and the one I have is a Chinese gong, a large one. And that one, if you play it, you get various sounds, various tones, and if you hit the gong in a different place, you'll get different vibrations. And the same thing, I have one gong. It's called a dark star gong, and it's actually the gong that the Grateful Dead played on Dark Star, which
famous Dark Star, yeah.
Yes. So I have that, and then on the one I have a Vietnamese gong, and it's like a little nipple, and so if you hit that, it's one sound on that.
But when you say sound, is it like a chord of like a chord like an A over a B flat, or is it just solid A? I mean,
on that one, the Vietnamese one, it's one note, one sound.
Okay.
It'll vibrate, but it's one sound. On the Chinese one, that large one, you're going to get various tonalities while you're playing it. And so what I wanted to do, one of the things about the gong is it's one of the oldest instruments in the world. It goes back to 3500 BC, and it was originally an instrument that they played like in Tibet and China, and a very spiritual sound. So that was part of my thought process when I wrote that piece. And then I have the different sounds vibrate at the same time. So you get a lot of different tonalities going on at the same time, different sounds, and then just to kind of have them bring a vibration to the earth and we're thinking love. So that's what we wanted to do. And then it goes into, after that, it goes into a Native American kind of sound in the piece when I start playing, and then it develops into more of a jazz piece, and then it goes through that, and then eventually goes back to like the Native American sound, and then at the very end, the sound of the gongs again. So,
and you're all still within the same key during the piece, or like you said, you were going into a Native American sound, and that would be, I guess, a different key than.
Well,
like
not
sound,
really,
no?
because when you have the gongs in there, it with all the tonalities, it's not really in like a key.
Okay.
So when you start with the Native American, it's like kind of a sound, and then the even though the piece changes, it doesn't really change the key. It just kind of like, I don't know, just kind of a natural kind of flow from it, and that piece kind of just developed from one thing to another.
And when you said you were playing, what instrument were you playing?
I played a soprano saxophone.
Okay.
So that's my instrument, and besides playing the gongs, of course. And we also, I forgot to mention that the piece also starts off with Linda playing a singing bowl from Tibet. And
What's that? What's a singing bowl?
If you listen to the very beginning of the song, you'll hear like sounds. What it is, it's almost like a meditation kind of a sound. And if you it's a bowl, you hold it, and then you have a wooden mallet, and you go around the side of the bowl, and it has a ringing sound, and many people use that if they when they're meditating to get a sound of like an om or a spiritual sound. So that's how the song starts, with the singing bowl, goes into the gongs, the drums come in, it goes into the Native American sound, and then into the jazz feel, and then back into the Native American sound, with all kind of a spiritual kind of feeling. Even in the jazz part, when I'm playing, I don't know. To me, it's very spiritual. So that was my intention for that piece.
I don't know if you could hear it, but I'm playing it in the background, and the recording will pick it up. But it was a great narration, because I'm picking that up now, and I actually understand the song now much better because of that.
It's funny because sometimes, like, musicians will play something and then put no explanation or never explain it, and you're thinking, where is this coming from? So I think it's kind of a nice thing to be able to explain your thought process and the instruments and how you've thought about it and arrived at the piece. And it's actually a fun piece when we're playing live, because we start off the piece with all the musicians in the group working together, playing different gongs, and I put them all over the stage, and it's kind of like a cool setting.
So how many gongs would be on stage?
Depending on how many I can carry with me. But I try to bring like at least 4 or 5 with me. We just played a concert, and I wanted to bring one other large gong with me, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to possibly carry it, because we're in the city, and we had to get a taxi to take us there, and there's only so many hands you have. So I was like, I think I better leave this one home. So
how about this? At the ideal performance, how many gongs, how many other instruments? Assuming no limitations of
If I had no limitations, I'd bring six or seven gongs with me. I'd bring a singing bowl with me. I'd bring Tibetan bells with me. I bring all kinds of shakers and percussion instruments. I don't know when along the line I became fascinated with percussion instruments, but I play all of that. And then my ideal band is me playing soprano saxophone, having a tenor saxophone in the group, of course a piano, an acoustic bass, and drums. So that's my my ideal band, and with all that other percussion instruments. And so the last time we played recently, we just did a CD release. I brought 5 gongs with me, and I did bring the Tibetan bells and the singing bowl. And so I try to bring as many. I have. If you come into my house, in my apartment, you'll see all kinds of toys. In fact, it's a funny thing because talking about my granddaughter, I have plenty of toys for her to play with, just my percussion instrument. So she comes in, I just play. She plays. She likes to come over and play the gong, and then I have all these things. I have also like a Native American drum, which is really cool. And
how does that sound? How is that different from like a traditional snare drum or a traditional timpani?
If you listen to, actually, I don't know if you, it's hard to kind of explain it, but if you listen to like any kind of like Native American, where they have like that constant beat of just like a drum, I don't know how to explain it, except that if you listen to Native American, the one thing about the Native American interpretation of the drums is that it's a heartbeat. So it's like a constant beat on this thing, and it has like a nice drum sound. I could probably go get it and play it if you want to.
Well, you know what? We have to take a break. So
okay.
So maybe on the other side of this break, we'll actually explain that. So this is Richard Solomon, Paul Solomon, Stan Chovnick from Metropolitan Records, which is Metropolitan Records. NYC.com. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Metropolitan Records, NYC.com. And we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rory Cosgrove, and you're listening to Rich Solomon on WCWP 88.1 FM.
Welcome back. Richard Solomon, taking care of business with Paul Solomon and our guest, Stan Chovnick, Metropolitan Records. And we were talking about Native American drum. And before the break, we said Stan would go out and pull one out and give us a sample of what that heartbeat music was. So, Stan, take it away.
So that's the sound of the Native American drum, and
they're very different from like a normal set for a jazz drumming.
Oh yes, it's very, very different. One of the things that I've been enjoying doing, as you said, have I evolved, is combining jazz with music from other cultures, and I find that like really fascinating because I think it's very important to bring the world together through music, and especially like instrumental music where there's no words, so there's no language, and you just have people listening to it and enjoying it for what it is, and then you bring in certain elements from different cultures, and then and you're playing jazz, and so you're combining these elements, and you're making kind of like a real unique kind of music. And
I guess with my classical blinders on, I would find that hard to visualize because I'm so used to a certain tonality. I guess as a jazz person, you could have more flexibility because you're probably dealing with some atonal stuff with other ethnic music, right?
Well, it's funny because I've kind of like gotten myself in a place where I really do that. There's a lot of jazz musicians who just, it's jazz, it's American jazz, it's not developed any further than that. These people could travel around the world and be all over, but they're playing the same music that they've always played. To me, if I go somewhere, like my daughter was living in Japan, and then I wrote a piece, which it's not on the CD, but it's kind of a Japanese sound to it, but it's jazz. It's a blues.
Would you explain the Japanese sound, like a kyoto sound, like that?
No, it's just if you listen to like any kind of traditional Japanese music, it's kind of like almost like a pentatonic scale with certain tonalities, and if you then combine it, like I combine the song with a blues scale, so it's
very different.
So if you listen to it, you can hear the influence of the Japanese music. At the same time, you can definitely hear that it's blues. So things like that kind of like inspire me. I like doing it. And Linda Pressgrave, who we mentioned before, she's done a lot of that too. We love doing it. She wrote an Asian suite when we went to Japan, Macau, to Hong Kong, and then when we went, we played a jazz festival in France, and she wrote a French suite, and the same thing. So we play together all the time. But
getting back to your Japan setup, what would be the instrumentation?
It's the same instrumentation that in our traditional group, which is the bass.
Right.
Drums.
A bowed bass or a plucked bass?
Like a bow. Well, both, because it's you can do one at some point and another at the other. Okay. It's an acoustic bass, and it just so happens that our drummer is Japanese, which is. And then Linda on piano, and then I play the soprano saxophone, and once in a while, depending on the performance, we have a tenor sax, but most of the time it's a quartet. But then I'll depending on what the piece, I'll add in some percussion instruments and maybe like a gong or something that I think that might fit in, or some other percussion instrument that would fit into the piece, the sound of that piece, so that it's I try to make it a very natural.
So synthesizers are forbidden. That's not natural.
Yeah, since we don't usually use any kind of electronic instruments like that. But yes, it's usually just acoustic instruments. That's what we play. That's what I write for. Yeah, that's.
Now, do you go around the world collecting instruments?
I do, unfortunately. It's not a good habit, I guess. I mean, as far as for my pocketbook, but I do. If we go somewhere, I usually will check out whatever's around, and we like to go to performances wherever we are, and then that Native American drum. We were in Taos, and they had this phenomenal Native American drum store, which I probably could have been there all day. I mean, till Linda dragged me out. But I ended up buying one.
What did they have? What did they have there? What are the different types of drums that you came across?
They had, I'd say, probably about 500 different kinds of sizes and styles, and wow. Different. Each one sound. The interesting thing about that is that, like in that place, each one was handmade. So each drum had its own sound. So I, of course, me being obsessed with it, I'm trying each one to make sure which is the sound of the one that I want to buy.
And I guess different mallets would have created different...
Yes, and that's the same with the gongs. I can play a piece on one of the gongs and then use a different mallet, and you're going to get a different sound. So that's all a part of like knowing what sound that you want to get on the instrument. But I do enjoy going to different places, seeing different instruments, and then getting something that's not really known to the average person, and then just thinking this is a really cool instrument, and then getting it and thinking, hey, I might be able to use this in a piece, like a certain piece that I'm writing or that we play or something of that sort. But I do think it's very, to me, interesting to combine all of these different cultures with jazz. And again, it's like bringing people together and bringing music together to make a universal language of just the music. And I enjoy it when we play, if we're playing somewhere, and we play this one place in particular a lot. It's a Japanese jazz bar, and there'll be people from all over the world, and I don't know them, and they don't know who we are, and they're just enjoying the music and listening to the different elements that we put that might have an influence from a certain part of the world, and combine it with jazz, and I enjoy it, and I'm always happy when seeing that people seem to be enjoying it. So
when you meet an artisan who crafts an instrument, what do you learn about the sound of the instrument and the use of that instrument that you wouldn't just get by just holding it in your hand and trying to experiment with it?
Well, usually you'll hear what the person who made the instrument is conveying with what they made, and then you'll kind of like want to hear what it sounds like, and then I'm always kind of listening with my music in mind, thinking this would really fit in with what I'm writing now, or this one piece that we play, if I added this in, this would really be cool. And so that's usually what I'm thinking. And
so to give you a question, I don't mean to interrupt, but is it like cooking where you have sort of like a certain kind of entree that you're preparing, but these other things are like the spices?
Yes, they're definitely the spices. Definitely, yes. Now, a piece like Love Vibrations, they're more than the spices because it's a vital part of the first several minutes of the piece. Are just the gong, so the spices are really heavy there.
So maybe it's more like a root vegetable.
Yeah. But in many of the other pieces, they're just another element that is added in to spice it up. If you listen to the beginning of Searching for Spirituality, you'll hear like chimes in there, and wind chimes, and that's like a spice at the beginning of it, where you're hearing this, and it kind of like fits into the mood of the piece, and it just these elements just I don't know, like you said, spice it up.
We're playing a little piece of that in the background.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear it because I'm running it through the soundboard, and I'm just trying to play it ever so slightly in the background. But your narration really brings out to me as a non-musician the elements of the song. See, Paul, as a musician, really has such a different view.
But I would have viewed it differently. I would have listened without Stan's explanation, I would have listened to it very differently. So now I'm going to have to re-listen to everything now that I hear it from Stan, because it's going to change it completely.
In many ways, what you may want to do on maybe like on your YouTube channel is give sort of
of an overview of what people are listening to.
That sounds
for
great.
context, because I think your explanation adds such a richness to the musical listening experience.
Thank you.
You know, it's almost like years ago, like Japanese music was this tablature. It was written on how to place your fingers, but that you didn't know what the melody was. Whereas Western orchestral music, you know exactly what the melody is, and sometimes you get the fingerings, but you don't have the behind-the-scene thoughts. Imagine if Mozart wrote down what he was thinking when he wrote the Requiem.
That would be really interesting.
Right, so you have to do that with this music.
Right.
Because who knows, maybe 10 years from now, looking back, you may want to supplement saying, now I look at it differently as the composer, and I want to,
It's almost like the Talmud, where you have the different comments by the different people over the years.
Right.
Rashi.
Well, it's always nice
said
to
that.
hear what the composer was thinking when he's writing the piece, because there are many times that I listen to a piece, and then I'm big on buying CDs. Some people these days, the young people don't buy CDs, but the older people do, and I like reading all of the notes. And the worst thing I hate is when there's something that's really interesting, and I'm trying to figure out like what the thought process was for the composer, and there's no notes.
The only thing I ever had that came close to it is when I was in Great Neck Philharmonic and we performed Elmer Bernstein's The Ten Commandments. He actually, in the rental part, he actually wrote in his thoughts.
That's
but not that, mind you, not much.
Yeah.
But a little bit of what the orchestra should be doing, but to a tiny, tiny fraction. And we were all savoring at that. So imagine if you maybe did almost like a director's cut as you talk over, like listen to the entrance of the saxophone at measure number 500 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it's a musical journey.
One of the most interesting concerts that I went to as a teenager, which probably did influence me because I do love music from all over the world, was actually a Ravi Shankar concert where he gave out materials on all of the ragas that he was playing. I still have it.
Wow.
But it was like a really interesting thing because you're listening to this music that's very foreign, and then there's all of these written documents explaining the different ragas and what he was doing and all of that sort of thing, and it did help. It did help increase your awareness and interest in it, and so that's another piece. The one piece that Little Princess, which was written for my granddaughter, if you listen to it, it's a very exotic-sounding piece. Not that my granddaughter's very exotic. I mean, she's great, but I don't know exotic. But I don't know. I just kind of heard an exotic sound. Because
can you define what you mean by exotic sound? I'm not following.
I'm playing in the background.
It's kind of a sound of either a Middle Eastern or Indian sound, and with a scale that a Middle Eastern sounding scales involved in the piece, and it was scales that it probably exists, but I just put it together, and it just kind of came out, and that's another piece that even though it wasn't. It was just came out, so it's like listening to the different music from all over the world influenced the piece, and it just naturally then came out of me.
It's kind of funny, the world of synchronicity. Earlier today during pre-production, for some reason, I was listening on YouTube to an interview of George Harrison, and with him was Ravi Shankar.
Oh, wow.
Because they were promoting a Ravi Shankar album that George Harrison was the producer of, and they were on VH1, and apparently they kind of just went into the studio just to sort of maybe do a little bit about Ravi Shankar's album, and it said became a whole full-fledged interview, and he even did a sort of an impromptu concert with a borrowed guitar. And it's just kind of funny how you mentioned that, because It's not every day I really hear about Ravi Shankar or listen to his music, and yet it popped up twice in one day. So maybe there's some kind of.
We'll have to listen. I'll have to listen to that interview now.
It had something like 5 million hits. So
oh wow!
When we're done with the radio show, I'll point it out to you. But it was really cool. And George said some very profound things in the interview. But we'll leave that for another day. We only have another minute in this segment, so we're really flying by. I think at some point I do want to talk to you a little bit about the musicians. That you regularly play with. Maybe we can, when we pick it up on the other side, we could do a little bit of that.
That sounds great.
And then I also want to talk about your impressive catalog of music and your performances, which are something that people really need to strive to see here and there because they're just such treasures.
Nothing like a live performance.
That's true. Yeah. That is true.
And that's where real communities are built. In the audience.
It's very important.
All right, so Richard Solomon, Paul Solomon, Taking Care of Business, Stan Chovnick, Metropolitan Records, MetropolitanRecordsNYC.com. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Anastasia Zotos from Athens, Greece, and we listen to Richard Solomon on our computers, and we love it.
Welcome back. Richard Solomon, Paul Solomon, Stan Chovnick. Taking Care of Business is the show, and we have been exploring Love Vibrations for Planet Earth, a CD that's been produced by Metropolitan Records. Stan Chovnick is not only the president of the label, but he's one of the musicians as well. And we've been having just a great discussion about jazz. It's refreshing to talk about jazz, especially, new music. It's just, the world needs new music. In fact, my father's place is reopening in Roslyn, and one of their mantras is that it's going to be, original music, whether it's legacy bands or new bands. It's going to be still original music. So that's something we'll talk about offline. Anyway, I was asking just before the break, who are all these great musicians that you play with? I know there's Stan, who's on the radio with us. There's Linda, who we've had as a past guest. But you have all these great other people. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, well, one thing I'm going to mention is that Linda and I always play together. We play no matter where it is in New York, or we could be playing. Luckily, if we're in a jazz festival in Italy or France or wherever, and we think very much alike. Linda's a great composer, arranger, and piano player, and we just work really well together. So that's the initial mention. The drummer that we used on the CD, for the most part, because there's a couple, you'll notice there's a few drummers, but the one that we play with all the time is Seiji Oshii. He's from Japan, and we've been playing with him since 2002. So we've played a lot of jobs with him. We've in New York. He did play with us when we went to Italy a couple of times, and he's a great musician. He takes it very seriously. I love that about him. He puts his heart and soul into it, and you just you can feel it when he's playing.
Where did he study, and how did you meet him?
I met him actually through Linda, because Linda had been playing with some. There's a friend of mine who had a group. Had a group. I don't know if she's playing anymore, but he had a group, and she was playing with his group for a while, and Seiji was playing with them, and then we got a job where we were playing every Friday night at the Warwick Hotel in Manhattan on 54th Street. And right away, Linda said we should definitely use Seiji, and since then we've been using him. So he's just a great drummer, and he's from Japan. I'm not sure exactly where he studied in Japan.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the bass player that we used on the CD is a very excellent musician. His name is Dimitri Motorbaka. And besides being a great bass player, he's also a great tenor sax player. And in fact, on the first piece, that Love Vibrations for Planet Earth, he plays first Linda plays piano solo, I play a soprano saxophone solo, and Dimitri plays a great tenor solo on the recording. So he plays professionally both bass and tenor sax. So it's a really that's an interesting combination.
And how did you meet him?
And again, I met him. It was he was playing saxophone in a big band that was like a rehearsal band at the Union. And they would rehearse every week. And Linda was actually the piano player. And one week the bass player didn't show up, and then he said, "I'll play the bass." And I guess everybody thought he was joking. But they had a bass there, and then he started playing, and then he could really play. So I think he surprised people. But he's a great bass player, great musician. He has a great feel, great sense of timing.
People don't realize how difficult it is to play bass well. There are many bad bass players out there, and most people do not have the ear to listen to the lower tones, the lower end of the string section.
Yes, it's a very important instrument, especially in jazz, because the rhythm section in jazz have to be excellent because they're holding the piece together. Like as a sax player, you're on top, but if the bottom is not there and somebody doesn't have a great sense of time and a great sense of melody, then it's hard to keep the piece together and to take it to other places. So that's the main core of the CD. But I'm going to just mention a couple other people who are on that CD. One is Oliver Lake, and he's like a legendary alto sax player who's played with everybody. He was part of the World Saxophone Quartet, and he plays on the song "The Journey," and he's great. And then the bass player on that the fourth and fifth piece is Harvey S. And he's one of the incredible bass players. He's played with everybody and recorded with every jazz musician. He has an incredible sense also of time and melody, and he's just fantastic. He's one of the best bass jazz soloists I've ever heard. And then we have Todd Herbert, who is an incredible tenor sax player. He plays on the song that I wrote, Universal Freedom. And Todd was actually recommended to me by the legendary trumpet player Freddie Hubbard, and said that you need to hear this guy Todd. And then when I heard him, I was like, oh my God, this guy's incredible. And then we have two other great drummers on the CD. One drummer in the fifth piece is Alison Miller, and she's rated in the top in all the jazz polls. She's rated as one of the top drummers. She's just a phenomenal drummer. She plays on some of the subs on some of the TV shows, Seth Meyers, and I know whenever she's on, they're always featuring her, and she's a great drummer. And then the other person is Eric Allen, who's also a great drummer, and he played with one of the famous trumpet players, Wallace Roney, for a while. And so it's just a great group of musicians, and that's very important when you're playing with great musicians. It brings you to a place where you might not have been able to go if you didn't have that kind of people around you playing incredible music.
Now, pardon me. I know that we've discussed Along the Path in a prior show, but I'm looking at your catalog on Metropolitan Records NYC.com.
Right.
You have an impressive array of music and titles.
Thank you.
You want to talk about some of them?
Well, my philosophy again is that I'm very big on original music, on bringing the music forward to a new place. So most of the CDs, whether they're Linda CDs or Todd Herbert, who's recorded a few CDs, or some of the other ones, we have Billie Harper, who is one of the foremost tennis players in the world, on the label. We do have a Freddie Hubbard CD on the label. But one of the things that's very important to me is to bring music forward, not to make it a past, almost like music that's you're enjoying because of what it was in the past, but just bringing it forward and making the music current, and having a lot of original pieces with great musicians, and just keeping it moving.
So then my question would be, if, let's say, a member of our audience who does not have fluency in jazz, what would you recommend as a good first step to listen to off your catalog?
If they're just trying to get into
they have
jazz,
very little knowledge of jazz, what would be a good first piece? The only thing they know of jazz is what they heard on the radio. So what would you say would be a good first piece to listen to?
I would say even a piece like Along the Path, because it's a piece, it's a CD where the music is all very listenable. It's not something that's like really far out and you're thinking, oh my God, what in the world are they doing? I have to get into this before I really could enjoy it. It's something that you can listen to and have no knowledge of jazz and just enjoy it. And that's one of the ways I see that is when we're playing in some of these places that people are coming to, and they're eating dinner, and they're not only just going for the music, but all of a sudden they're like really enjoying the music, and you can see that they're just like start to get fascinated. So to me, if somebody isn't like a jazz fanatic and they're just listening, they're sitting there, and then all of a sudden they start to really get into it because it's very listenable and relatable, that's something that is a great thing. So I would say like Linda's CDs are very, very listenable. We have another CD. It's called Skim Coat, where we have Billy Childs, Buster Williams, Carl Allen's a trio. That's three fantastic musicians. They've played with everybody, and that's definitely listenable. There's one CD. We have so many that it's hard for me to slow down. But we have another CD. It's called the Sterling Place All-Stars, and just coincidentally, 4 great jazz musicians were living on the same street in Brooklyn, Sterling Place, and we recorded it, and that is extremely listenable, excellent. It's like featuring a great alto player, Vincent Herring, who is phenomenal, and it has piano player Ronnie Matthews on there, and Carl Allen's on there, and it is definitely listenable and enjoyable. So you don't have to be a jazz musician to listen to those CDs.
Now I'm going to give a different question.
Okay.
What if someone with an extensive jazz background, they are expert jazz listeners, what should they listen to? What would you recommend for that person?
I would recommend that if anybody is excellent and very versed in jazz, if they put on the Freddie Hubbard CD, Above and Beyond, they'd flip out. Freddie Hubbard was like, besides Miles Davis, was probably the foremost trumpet player from 1960s to maybe 1990s. And Freddie Hubbard, this was a recording that he had made in a live concert in California at Keystone Corner. And a producer who had recorded, he owned the club at the time. He had recorded many of the shows, and he had recorded the show, and he played it for me, and I was flipping out because it was like probably the best jazz trumpet I've ever heard. And I got in touch with Freddie Hubbard, and Freddie Hubbard said, "Let me hear it." And then Freddie Hubbard, who has made hundreds of recordings, said, "This is my best playing on record." So that's like
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be reading like an article, and people talk about 10 best trumpet solos. They'll be talking about the song "Softly as the Morning Sunrise," and that song is in many times people say that's like top 10 trumpet solos, jazz trumpet solos ever. So I would definitely recommend that. And then if the other one that I would recommend to somebody is Billie Harper. Billie Harper is a absolutely phenomenal musician, and he's been in the forefront of jazz for many years, and he's played with everyone, and the CD is phenomenal. It's just like it's spiritual, it's powerful, it's interesting, it's great music. So
now, while we're on the catalog, because we talked about sort of the intro and the Supermax, running with jazz.
Yeah. Well, when I was in high school, I was the captain of my track team, and I ran, and then I didn't run for 36 years. And one day when I was in my 50s, I decided that I was going to start walking again, just going on the treadmill and walking. Well, I did that for a while, and then one day I said, I'm going to run for 1 minute on the treadmill today. And Linda's like, why? And I said, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And then a week or two later, I ran 2 minutes and 3 minutes, and before you know it, I started running again. And when I ran as a teenager, there were no headphones, there were no iPods, there were no music that you can listen to. And then now you can do that. You can put on headphones, you can put on music, and so I thought it would be fun to pick out music from our catalog that would be fun to run to.
Hilarious.
Wow, cool. All right. So we only have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't really discussed?
The other CD that I was going to mention, which is an absolutely phenomenal CD, and in fact, there were a couple of people who called this the record of the year in about the year 2000, is a CD called Haunted Melodies. And one of my favorite sax players, besides John Coltrane, who's my favorite, is a person named Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And he was a blind sax player, and he played sometimes 3 saxophones at the same time, which I don't know.
Unbelievable.
I don't know how he did it, but he did. And people thought of him as a novelty, but we actually had somebody arrange his music, and we have on the CD 11 different sax players, all top sax players playing his music. And the CD is just, you have to listen to it.
And you can, because on your website you can sample it.
That's right. It's an incredible CD. It has so many great pieces and so many great people on it, and that was a tribute we did to Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
Wow. So. And sadly, we're out of time. But before we leave, we have to thank Stan for spending some time with us, really giving us a great education on jazz. Paul, thank you for great musical insights. I couldn't have done it without you. And you got a great, impressive catalog of great musicians. We need to have you back when the next CD comes along. And if anybody has questions, email it to us, and we'll forward it over to Stan. And definitely catch his shows. They're posted under his news, and contact us, and on his homepage. It's great stuff.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Paul. And thank you, Paul, for bringing your insight and questions to me.
Thank you.
All right, so for everybody out there, we'll see you in a week. Thanks for listening.